Hey everyone, Rob B here with Rob D, and you are listening to the Property Podcast. And it's time to bring you all the big news in the world of property. And the big news this month, without question, is house prices.
Welcome to the Property Podcast. Thank you for joining us. In case you don't know, we run a business that buys more than £100 million worth of property every year. You can find out about that at propertyhub.net/invest. And to do that, we have to keep a close eye on the market. So today, we're going to bring you up to date with everything that's going on that you need to know about.
Before we get into our first news story, it's going to be a fun night tonight for those attending our Property Hub Select meetup in London. If you don't know what Property Hub Select is, then you are truly missing out. It's an extra thing we do, a bit like Hub Extra at the end of the podcast, for all our wonderful investors that we work with. So, for example, our investors of Property Hub Invest, they get a 2-year membership to this exclusive group. And that means that you get loads of masterclasses, you get access to these meetups, you get the social channels. There's so much more that we do. And it's amazing. And we barely ever talk about it, but I'm really looking forward to tonight. And Rob, I know that you are especially looking forward to tonight because you're doing a big reveal.
Yeah, as if being a member of Property Hub Select wasn't exciting enough. Tonight, Select members are going to get the exclusive on my new book. It's not out till January, but tonight I'll be revealing the cover, the title, and we'll be chatting about it a little bit as well. So it's going to be a really fun night. If you want to find out more about Property Hub Select, you can do that at propertyhub.net/select. But that'll be too late for you tonight. Don't worry though, because there might just be something book related coming up on the podcast very soon.
Without question, the big news story this month is all about house prices. And we've got data flying at us from all different angles. And it's hard to know where to start. But it really seems there's been a shift in momentum when it comes to house prices. And Rob, I think we should start with Home Track, because we don't cover Home Track every month. And Home Track really focuses on the regions. And that's important to us because we, on a regular basis, recommend different areas to invest. And at the beginning of every year, we pick the areas that we believe will perform best each year. And I'm conscious, Rob, it's October, so that means we're getting close to the end of that year. Shall we have a sneak peek of how we're getting on and what areas are doing quite well at the moment?
Yeah, I'm sure one of us said Belfast, right? Did one of us say that? No, I don't think we did, But I wish we had, because it's topping the table. 5.1% annual house price growth in Belfast. Absolutely smashing it. But let's pretend we're talking about England only, because then we've got Manchester in second place. Manchester still doing really well. Always the temptation to think that it's peaked because it's had so much growth, but nope, still going strong. You've got Liverpool up there, Leeds up there as well. And down the bottom, unsurprisingly, you've got pretty much every city in the south. London, interestingly, as a region, is holding up better than the other regions of the southeast. And that might be tied into something else that's remarked on in this report, which is that some coastal and rural areas are seeing supply of homes up by 40% over last year. This is, again, this reverse race for space phenomenon, the race away from the space. Too much space, we don't like it, and we need to get back to the office, and loads of stuff is based in London. Maybe that's why London's holding up relatively well, I don't know, but a really striking pattern there.
Home Track have also reported in their summary that the mortgage rates being the lowest that they've been for 15 months has boosted activity. And that is why we're seeing such strong data across the board. Let's go and have a look at Nationwide's data, because in the month of September, we've seen house price growth of 0.7%, which doesn't sound a lot, but that's 1 month. So that's actually quite strong. Last month was down by 0.2%. So that's been recovered and some. But overall, for the year now, the annual change in house prices, according to Nationwide, is 3.2%. That's pretty strong. We say this every month, and we probably will for the rest of this year. There's not much of the year left. But remember, everybody was talking down the market at the beginning of the month, pretty much everyone. And the majority of people were saying house prices are going to fall. They're going to fall this year, and by some way. And here we are now, September's been complete with very strong data and seems to be getting stronger. And Rob, if you think Nationwide's data's strong, wait until we talk about Halifax.
Yeah, Halifax has got the month being slightly lower, but year on year, up 4.7%. So Nationwide's year on year is 3.2, Halifax is 4.7. The report also talks about the market coming back to life more generally, and the number of mortgages agreed is up 40% over the last year and is now back to the levels that it was before everything went a little bit wrong a couple of years ago. So some big numbers in here, of course, fueled in part by rates coming down. And we could see more of this because Andrew Bailey, the chair of the Bank of England, has said that the path of rate cuts that everyone is anticipating could be more aggressive. Him using the word aggressive is quite something.
I'd describe that commentary as aggressive, Rob.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not the type of thing that we've heard from the Bank of England for, I can't remember actually, been many, many years.
No, maybe because the Fed has now moved, they feel like they can start talking tough as well. But if that happens, if people start to expect that mortgage rates are going to come down faster than expected, that could be even more positive for the market going into the end of the year. But we do have something looming. We've got the budget at the end of this month. And so I'm sure there will be a degree of people sitting back, waiting to see what's in there. We're not anticipating anything that's going to affect the housing market directly, although we don't know. But there's so many rumours around taxes and pensions and all this stuff that depending on how that goes, that could cool things down a bit.
It could.
Or we could see another flurry of activity once it's out the way.
I think both are possible, Rob, but I'm surprised by the strength of September's numbers, because if you'd forced me to say how I'd think September's numbers have gone before looking at the data, I would have assumed that it would have been a bit weak because of the upcoming budget, because a lot of people that I'm speaking to seem to be very focused on that. Maybe it's the circles that I mix in, but seem to be very focused on the budget. And a lot of people are holding off big decisions, not just in property, but in the wider business and investment sense. So to see the strength of September is really interesting. I would, again, assume that October might be a little bit weak because of the budget. And again, people holding off, but we'll see. I was wrong about September. I could be very wrong about October as well. These numbers are very strong. And if the slight decrease in interest rates that we've had already has caused this, imagine what will happen if we do get these interest rate cuts that Andrew Bailey is talking about. And before we move on from house prices, we talked about Home Track and their regional data, but Halifax also report on the regional data, and Northern Ireland is the strong performer, dragging up the average as well. So it's 9.7% on an annual basis, according to Halifax. That's huge. Wales up 4.4%, Scotland just up by 2.1%, but the Northwest up by 5.1%. After Northern Ireland, it seems the Northwest is the strongest performer. But even London, which has been hammered year after year, is still up by 2.6%, according to Halifax. So positivity across the board. It's really, really interesting. Yes, we both predicted decent years for property, but I think this is even starting to take us by surprise. And we could see a mini surge towards the end of the year if the budget isn't too scary. We'll obviously report on that in a few weeks' time. We will see. But I suppose you could say, Rob, I'm pleasantly surprised by the market activity this year.
So all eyes on the budget, but also a lot of attention at the moment, of course, on rental reform. We've got more clarity now about what that will look like. We did an episode about that a few weeks ago, and we've got a YouTube video summarising that, so you can go to our YouTube channel and check that out if you need to be brought up to date. As of the day this podcast comes out, yesterday, the Renters' Rights Bill will have had its second reading in Parliament. That hasn't happened at the point we're recording this, but I don't think anything that interesting will come out of that because it's just a procedural debate. There won't be anything decided at that point, but nevertheless, it is continuing its journey through Parliament, and they seem like they're trying to get it through relatively quickly, in contrast to the last reform bill we had, where there didn't seem to be a lot of enthusiasm or urgency around it. One thing that, of course, we know will not be in there is rent controls. No suggestion of rent controls at all, which of course is a very good thing. We know this from multiple experiments around the world. We know this from what's been going on in Scotland recently. And now, Rob, we know this from Argentina. A really interesting story that actually a listener sent in to me. Thank you, whoever it was that did that. Interesting story from the Wall Street Journal, where for anyone who doesn't know, Argentina had a new president, I'd say within the last year, roughly a year ago, who's been trying to get to grips with the economy, taking all kinds of pretty radical measures. One of those measures is scrapping a system of rent controls that had been in place. So they had rent controls. He's taken them away. And since taking them away, rent prices have fallen in real terms by 40%, which I just think is incredible. And the reason for that, according to the article, is lots of people, when the controls were in place, were just leaving their properties empty or renting them out on the black market. Now those controls have been removed and there's a market functioning again. Everything's got better. What a surprise.
So tell your friends, that's a dinner party stat, that one. You know, when you inevitably talk about rent controls, maybe it's just by dinner parties. But if it comes up, you can drop that one in and feel very smug, because that is a stat and a half. Now, as winter is coming, there's not going to turn into a Game of Thrones episode. It is actually coming. Hopefully you've worked out seasons by now. But it does give us an excuse to talk about heating, Rob, or energy, or more specifically, EPC improvements. And it seems to be a bit of improvement because Currently, it's estimated that 2.9 million properties need to be improved under the government's proposal for rental properties to reach an EPC rating of C by 2030. The question is, Rob, that sounds like quite a lot of work to be done. Should we be worried?
I think a lot of people are worried at the moment. EPCs have been talked about for years. At the Labour conference, I think it was, Ed Miliband floated this 2030 deadline. Worth remembering that in the past, we've had 2024 deadlines, 2026 deadlines. We've had lots of deadlines. Now it's 2030. That's being consulted on at the moment rather than being confirmed. Should you be concerned? I would say no. I would certainly not be rushing to do anything right now, partially because there may be support announced around this that hasn't been yet, partially because the way that EPCs are calculated could change, and partly because there's basically no way that it's going to end up being implemented with the strict definition and the strict timing that is proposed. Because you're not going to get 2.9 million homes improved by 2030. And if you end up with 1.5 million that haven't been done yet, you're not suddenly going to kick all the tenants out and say it's illegal. So there's no way it's going to happen. But clearly something along these lines is going to happen at some point. So if you've got a property that is not going to make it at the moment, but it potentially could, then it's the kind of thing to start thinking about now. Because obviously, when there's a change of tenancy, that would be the perfect time to get some work done without it being disruptive. So for me, this is something to be aware of, and we will, of course, continue to update on it in the Property Pulse newsletter and on the podcast. But headlines like this tend to cause a lot of panic and generate a lot of upset. I don't think that's necessary.
What is necessary for us to talk about is mortgages. And actually, it's so necessary that we have an episode in a few weeks' time with one of our mortgage experts coming in to tell us exactly what is happening with the mortgage market. So that's going to be an important one, especially with all the news around interest rates. It's going to be a must-listen to episode. But a piece of data that we've picked up on from the Mortgage Strategy website, one of our favourite websites we read daily, is that the number of tracker mortgages taken out over the past 3 years has jumped by 67%, even as interest rates, of course, have risen. And that, Rob, as you said when we were discussing this off air, is probably because the amount of people that think mortgage rates are going to drop and are happy to take a tracker for the short term. It's probably going to be a short-term trend, though, I imagine. But how long is short term? That's an interesting question. I don't know if you can answer that one, Rob, but I think at least for the time being, this trend could continue because especially with the Bank of England making noises about interest rate cuts, the interest in tracking mortgages is probably here to stay for a little while longer.
Yeah, you can't go around defining things like short term because then there's a chance for you to be wrong. You need to throw around terms like this very vaguely. That's the secret. That's what the economists do. But yeah, I think that's right. There will be a lot of people I expect over the coming months calling their mortgage brokers, trying to find out what fixed rates are out there. Because they'll be looking a lot more appealing and having that certainty will start to seem like a better idea again. And something else that we hope we will see, and starting to see the signs of now, is arrangement fees coming down. Because of course that's been the big shock really of the last couple of years. Yes, rates have gone up, but to prevent rates going up even further, arrangement fees have gone up dramatically. And again, Property Hub Select members had the scoop on this because we had a mortgage masterclass a couple of weeks ago and our guest expert spoke about how we were starting to see arrangement fees being cut. So still a lot further to go. I think both the things we've just spoken about, Rob, it's the start of a trend rather than a big shift. So I think we'll be watching that play out for the short term at least.
And finally, possibly my favourite news story of the whole episode. Rob, great news, I think. Avocado bathrooms are back. Yes, avocado, the colour of the 70s. Those bathrooms that we saw on all the property shows that needed ripping out because they were so dated and so ghastly are no longer ghastly. In fact, they're on trend. And apparently, Rob, 30% of homeowners between 18 and 34 said they would pick green, and I quote, with avocado shades in particular, if given a chance to upgrade their bathroom. There we go. Expect to see that in buy-to-lets across the nation soon, Rob.
Yeah, I'm getting increasingly used to feeling out of touch as I get older, but I've never felt more out of touch than I do right now. It's not a choice that I would personally be making. But I think this is a money-saving tip. Instead of upgrading your properties, just leave them, because give it 50 years, it'll all come back into style again.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping with my wardrobe anyway, Rob. So it's time for Hub Extra now, the part of the show where we give you more. And this week, Rob, you've got a TV show recommendation. You haven't shared with me what it is yet. So will this be making my list? Let's see.
Well, let's see if you've heard of it, because apparently everyone's talking about this. But have you heard of Nobody Wants This, a rom-com on Netflix?
No.
Great, not just me then. But I would encourage you to check it out. Because it's not a movie, it's a mini series, maybe about 10 episodes or so. They're all under half an hour, so it's very manageable rather than these big American things that are an hour long and go on forever. It's got Kristen Bell and Adam Brody in it. They're both brilliant. And for me, it's perfect because it's a rom-com. It's really easy watching, but it's not completely trashy. It's actually quite clever. It's genuinely really funny. So it's a nice switch your brain off type watch, but without feeling a bit guilty afterwards. So it's Nobody Wants This on Netflix. Strong recommendation from me.
And to follow up on that, I'm very late to the party on this one. And Rob, I know you've watched this series, but if just in case there are listeners who've not watched Ted Lasso yet, definitely check that out.
Ah, yes.
It's really good. That is another switch your brain off type show, but in a heartwarming way. So really good show. Highly recommend that as well.
Yes, that is a great watch. No need to feel guilty about that one either. Quality stuff. Well, that's us done for this episode. I hope you enjoyed being brought up to date with everything that's going on. Before we end, quick shout out to listener Paul, who got in touch to say, I've previously been a landlord and failed miserably due to a lack of knowledge. My brother recommended I check you guys out. I've just bought one of your books and came to realise if I ever really want to get into property investing, I need knowledge. Knowledge is power. I've just started listening to the Property Podcast and feel reassured and inspired by both of you. Well done, Paul. That is great to hear. And we'll be back next week to help you top up your knowledge that little bit more. But until then, have a great week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.